You've recorded a voicemail, or maybe you're watching a video someone took at a party. You hear yourself talk for 3 seconds and every cell in your body tries to eject from your skin at once. You sound wrong. Not bad necessarily, though yeah, also bad, but wrong in a way that's hard to articulate. Too high or too nasal or too something. That can't be what you actually sound like, except it is. That's you. That's the voice everyone else has been hearing your entire life while you've been walking around thinking you sound completely different. Here's the thing. You are the only person on Earth who doesn't know what you actually sound like. Every single other human who's ever heard you speak knows the real you. You're the lone outsider to your own voice. And when you finally do hear it, through a recording, a video, a voicemail, your brain does this full-body recoil like you just bit into what you thought was chocolate and it turned out to be soap. So what the hell is going on there? Why do we hate our own voice? And more importantly, why are we the only ones who hear it wrong in the first place? By the end of this, you're going to understand why your voice has been lying to you since the day you learned to talk, and why, for basically all of human history until about 150 years ago, nobody even knew this was happening. Let's sit with how bizarre this actually is for a second. You have spent tens of thousands of hours listening to yourself speak. You've been doing it since you were 2. You hear yourself every single day in conversations, on phone calls, talking to yourself in the car, muttering while you cook. You are intimately, constantly familiar with the sound of your own voice. And despite all that experience, all those hours logged, you have never actually heard it. Not the real version. Not the one everyone else hears. It's like if you looked in a mirror your whole life and saw a face, and then one day someone showed you a photograph and you looked completely different. Not unrecognizable, but wrong enough that your brain throws up red flags. Except with your voice, that's not a hypothetical. That's just what happens. Every other person gets to hear your actual voice. Your mom knows what you sound like. Your best friend. The barista you ordered coffee from this morning. They've all got the real data. But you've been listening to some kind of internal remix this whole time. Your voice, but run through a filter that only you can hear. And the weirdest part, this isn't some glitch. Your body is doing this on purpose. There's a reason you hear yourself differently. A specific evolutionary reason that made perfect sense for most of human history, right up until we invented the technology to record sound and suddenly gave everyone the ability to hear the truth about themselves. But to understand why your brain is pulling this trick on you, we need to go back, way back, before recordings, before microphones, before anyone had any way to hear their own voice except the version their skull was feeding them. We need to talk about the first person who ever realized they sounded different than they thought. Sometime around 100,000 years ago, there's a woman we'll call our gal. She's Homo sapiens, anatomically modern, fully capable of complex language. Her vocal tract has descended, her tongue is flexible, her brain has the wiring for syntax and grammar. She talks all the time. Her band talks all the time. It's one of their species' core advantages. The ability to communicate abstract ideas, to plan, to gossip, to coordinate hunts, to tell stories around a fire. She's heard her own voice, obviously. Every time she speaks, the sound of her words fills her ears. She's been hearing it her whole life. And she's never questioned it. Until one day, her group is deep in a cave system. They're in there for a reason, maybe harvesting ochre, maybe painting, maybe sheltering from weather. The details don't matter. What matters is that at one point our gal calls out to someone deeper in the cave. Just a quick shout. A name, maybe. A warning. And the cave throws her voice back at her. An echo. Clean, crisp, bouncing off stone walls and returning to her ears a half-second later. And it doesn't sound like her. Or it does, kind of. It's her words, her cadence. But the sound is off. Higher, thinner, less rich. Like someone else is doing a mediocre impression of her. She does it again. Shouts the same word. Same result. The cave gives her back this other version of herself. Now, here's the thing about echoes. They're old. They've been around as long as there have been enclosed spaces and sound waves. Animals don't care about them. Hearing your own bark or howl bounce back at you doesn't create an identity crisis if you're a wolf. But humans have language. Complex identity-linked language. Our gal doesn't just make sounds, she speaks, and the way she speaks is tied up in who she is. Her voice is her in a way that an animal call isn't. And so, when the echo comes back wrong, her brain notices. It flags the mismatch. She probably doesn't dwell on it. She doesn't have a framework for understanding what just happened. No concept of acoustics or bone conduction or frequency. Maybe she mentions it to someone. Maybe she doesn't. Either way, the moment passes. But the mechanism that created that moment, that's been with her, with all of us, since we started talking. Here's what was happening inside her skull. When our gal spoke, the sound waves from her voice traveled two paths. The first path was through the air, out of her mouth, bouncing around the environment, and back into her ears from the outside. That's air conduction, and it's how everyone else hears her. But the second path was through the bones of her skull. When her vocal cords vibrated, those vibrations traveled through the flesh and bone of her head directly to her inner ear. That's bone conduction, and it only works for the person speaking. Nobody else gets that signal. It's a private channel. Here's the problem. Bone conduction emphasizes lower frequencies. It makes your voice sound deeper, richer, more resonant than it actually is. It's like built-in bass boost, except you don't know it's happening because you've never heard the alternative. So when our gal heard that echo, pure air conduction, no bone involvement, she was hearing what everyone else hears when she talks. The real deal. And her brain, which had spent decades building an internal model of what she sounds like based on the bone-conducted version, went, wait, that's not right. Except it was. She was wrong. She'd just never had a way to know it. Okay, so why does this happen? Why did evolution set us up to hear ourselves wrong? Because it's not actually wrong. It's different, and that difference is doing something useful. When you talk, your brain needs feedback. It needs to know that the words coming out of your mouth match the words you intended to say. It needs to monitor volume. Are you shouting, whispering, talking at a normal level? It needs to track pitch, rhythm, clarity. And to do all that in real time, your brain uses the bone-conducted signal. Bone conduction is faster than air conduction. The vibrations travel through your skull at the speed of sound through solid matter, which is way quicker than sound moving through air. So the bone-conducted version of your voice reaches your auditory system a fraction of a second before the air-conducted version does. That tiny head start gives your brain a preview. It's like a rough draft of your speech arriving before the final version, which lets your motor system make micro-adjustments on the fly. You're constantly, unconsciously tweaking your pitch and volume and enunciation based on that internal feedback loop. So bone conduction isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's part of the system that lets you speak clearly without thinking about it. The downside, and this is a big one, is that it permanently distorts your sense of what you actually sound like. Your brain builds a voice map, a schema, an internal model of this is me talking. And because that model is constructed from a mix of bone conduction and air conduction, weighted heavily toward the bone-conducted signal, it doesn't match reality. You go your whole life thinking you sound like the person in your head, and then one day you hear a recording. Now here's the complication. For most of human history, this didn't matter. Our gal might have heard her echo and felt weird about it, but echoes are rare and fleeting. You can't study them. You can't replay them. You hear the discrepancy for a second, your brain goes, huh, weird, and then you move on with your life. For thousands of years, tens of thousands really, humans walked around with this built-in perceptual mismatch and never had a way to confront it. You'd hear yourself wrong forever and you'd never know. There were occasional glimpses. If you shouted across a valley and heard your voice bounce back, you might notice the difference. If you spoke into a clay pot or a tunnel, you might catch a slightly external version of yourself. But these were edge cases, brief and uncontrollable. So the trait stuck around. There was no evolutionary pressure to fix it because it wasn't broken. The bone conduction thing was doing its job, helping you regulate speech. The fact that it also created a lifelong illusion about what you sounded like was just not relevant. There was no survival cost to being wrong about your own voice, until we invented a way to prove ourselves wrong. April 1877. Thomas Edison is working on the phonograph. It's a weird little machine, a stylus attached to a diaphragm, etching grooves into a cylinder wrapped in tinfoil. When you speak into it, the sound waves make the diaphragm vibrate, and the stylus carves a physical record of those vibrations. Then you rotate the cylinder back to the start, and the stylus retraces the grooves, reproducing the sound. It's the first time in human history that you can capture sound and play it back. Edison tests it by reciting "Mary Had a Little Lamb" into the device. And when he plays it back and hears his own voice for the first time, not through echo, not distorted by distance, but clear and repeatable, he later describes being startled by it. He's not alone. As the phonograph spreads, as recording technology improves, millions of people have the same experience. They hear themselves on a recording for the first time and it's wrong. Except now, unlike our gal in the cave, they can't dismiss it. They can play it back, over and over. Confirmation that yes, this is actually what you sound like. This is what everyone else has been hearing, and people hate it. There are two things going on here. The first is the acoustic mismatch we've been talking about. You expect to hear the bone-conducted version, deep, resonant, familiar. Instead, you get the air-conducted version, thinner, higher, lacking that low-frequency richness. Your brain has a template for what your voice sounds like, and the recording doesn't match it. So your brain flags it as wrong, maybe even threatening, because mismatches in expected versus actual sensory data usually mean something's off. But the second thing is deeper and weirder and more psychological. Your voice isn't just a sound, it's tied to your identity. When you think about who you are, your voice is part of that package. It's how you express yourself, how you're recognized, how you exist in the world as a speaking person. You've built an internal sense of self that includes, "This is what I sound like." And then a recording comes along and says, "Actually, no, that's not you. This is you." It's a small identity crisis. The person you thought you were, the one with that particular voice, that timbre, that resonance isn't real. Or at least, isn't real to anyone but you. Everyone else has been interacting with this other version of you, the one on the recording, and you've been completely unaware. There's a concept in psychology called the mere exposure effect, which says we tend to like things more the more familiar they become. You've been exposed to the bone-conducted version of your voice literally every time you've spoken for your entire life. It's maximally familiar, so you prefer it, even though objectively there's no reason your bone-conducted voice is better than your air-conducted voice. It's just the one you know. The recording, meanwhile, is unfamiliar. You've barely heard it, so your brain doesn't have the same warm, comfortable association. It sounds alien, foreign, not you. And here's the kicker. Everyone else has been getting the mere exposure effect with your air-conducted voice. Your friends, your family, they've heard the real you thousands of times. And so to them, that's the normal, likable version. When they hear a recording of you, it sounds fine. Correct even. You're the only one who hates it because you're the only one who's been lied to. This happens to everyone, literally everyone. There are studies on this. In one experiment, researchers recorded people's voices and then played back both the original recording and a version that had been digitally altered to sound more like what the person thought they sounded like. Deeper, richer, more bone conduction-ish. And consistently, people preferred the altered version. They said it sounded more like them. But it wasn't. It was a fake, engineered to match their incorrect internal model. The truth is, you sound like the recording. That's you. That's what your voice is doing in the world. And the version you hear when you talk, that's the lie. The comforting, familiar, bass-boosted lie your skeleton has been telling you since you learned to say your first word. And now you know. You can't unknow it. Every time you hear a recording of yourself from now on, you'll understand exactly why it sounds wrong, and that it isn't actually wrong at all. You're just finally hearing the truth. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about, though. You will never, ever hear your own voice the way you hear it in your head while it's happening in real time. Even if you make peace with recordings, even if you listen to yourself enough that the air-conducted version starts to feel normal, you still can't escape the bone conduction when you're actually speaking. The skull vibration channel is always on. It's hardwired. You can't turn it off. Which means the you that you hear when you talk right now today out loud, that version is permanent, private, a one-person performance that only you will ever experience. Everyone else gets the recording. You get the original mix, bass-boosted, personal, wrong, and honestly, maybe that's fine. Maybe there's something kind of nice about the fact that there's a version of you only you get to hear. A secret frequency, the last thing about yourself that belongs only to you. Or maybe it's just your skeleton gaslighting you forever. Could go either way. If you want more videos about the weird evolutionary quirks that mess with your daily life, and why your body's been lying to you in ways you haven't even noticed yet, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. Your voice sounds fine, by the way. Everyone else already thinks so. You're the only holdout.